Hey guys, how you going? Today we'll be talking about HDRI maps and how we can actually set up our lighting, the environment to suit your project or anything else you do. Okay, so first of all, I'm just using one default project. It doesn't really make a difference. And with this project, we have a one daylight system that's using the V-Ray Sun and no skylight because V-Ray Sun doesn't really need any skylights. And the way this looks when rendered, and this is just using grayscale, so there's no textures applied. So it's looking something like this. And I'm using an interactive rendering engine, which is very slow and noisy, but it's very useful to show you how things work. So that means if I was to actually select, different views, it will actually start it's just going to start rendering those views. So this is how you can actually do really nice little floor plans like I showed you earlier. But anyway, sorry, I digress. So in this option here, if we just go in and we modify the times of day, you can sort of see how, as you're modifying this, your scene will be changing based on the sunlight position over here. And that's one way to do this. And you can still sort of see it's fairly flat. It still looks okay, but it doesn't give you the benefit that the HDRI maps can give you without actually doing any work whatsoever, right? And I'll show you how this works. So first thing is first, I'm going to go here and select our daylight and the modifier. I'm just going to deactivate it here. That means that no sunlight will be showing. Um, that means that there's no information here whatsoever. And to add our lights, our HRI lights, the best way, in my humble opinion, is to go on the create lights and we select a V-Ray light and we can just add that anywhere we want to. That's fine. At the modify, we can select our type and select it to dome. And if we click on perspective here, you can sort of see the dome does what it does. It basically just acts as a overall light, and the benefit of that is that it is just overcast. So basically that means that there's no direct shadows, there's just going to be shadows underneath. So this is similar, like I said, to the overcast day when there's no direct light in any direction and all you get is just overall brightness. So this is what the environment map does anyway. And then when we add our daylight scene, a light that we had before, it would actually have direct sunlight and it would start throwing shadows in one way, in one direction as you wish. But the HRI maps do something very different and it's actually very cool. So we will set up our materials to use the light. So basically if we select this light here, and we set it to dome, we can see that there's a texture. And currently it says to no map. So I'm just going to click on this no map. And from here, we need to select under V-Ray here, we can select a V-Ray HDRI. So just double click on that. You'll be getting something like this, okay? And in this option here, we need to select our HDRI maps. I have three examples here that we can sort of look at and we can see what it does. So we have the HDRI maps themselves. Then we have just the normal JPEGs of that and same scene. So for example, if I click on the overcast JPEG, you can see how the HDRI is going to look. But let's just select the actual JPEG itself. So this is actually just showcasing you the power of HDRI versus just a normal JPEG for the environment map. So we'll select our overcast and go OK. And what this does, I'm just going to now click and drag this map onto one of these slots. I usually select the bottom right to be your environment map and anything to do with your sky. That way you can easily know which map you need to modify to get different results. So when you do this, you just click on instance and do OK. Instance basically allows you to modify elements in here. This is directly linked to this map here. If we were to do a copy, this would not be linked to this in any way, shape or form. So always go instance for these sort of environmental slots, otherwise you will not have much results. Okay, so here's the scene now from the JPEG. And you can sort of see that it actually shows up in the background as well. And it doesn't really make a difference what it looks in the background. It doesn't make a difference that it is very blurry and oversaturated and sort of just not very good. Because the beauty of this is when we are rendering in 3D Max, you always save yourself an alpha image as well. So the alpha image is basically the black is usually your environment and the white is your geometry. And when you save in a file format that contains alpha or transparency, like the PNG or TIFF file, basically the sky itself will not be saved and it will become just transparent, and everything else will become as that's white will actually be showing up. So in this case, even though the 3D Max is showing us this image, the background actually will not save as long as we go file save as and we select it as PNG or TIFF or any other transparent formats. If you was to save this as a JPEG, this will be baked into the JPEG and you would not be able to replace this easily. But as a PNG, you can just import this and replace whatever background you want in your Photoshop file, and it's gonna look quite good. Okay, so in this, just showing another thing, if you press on this little H right here, it will bring up this history preview. And if you enable it here, you can actually start saving different options of your renders, so previous options, so you can actually then compare what you've done before and the current one. So in this case, we selected uh, the JPEG first in here. Sorry, let me just go back to my little material editor here. So we selected the overcast as a JPEG, and I'm going to select the actual overcast HDRI. So that's the same image, same map, but just actually using the HDRI mapping, and you can sort of see here how much richer the actual environment is. Everything is more punchy and you can actually see the better shadows, and it just makes your scene look much nicer in a very simple way without actually having to deal with much a lighting setup whatsoever. So I'm going to save this one as the next one. So we're just going to select and compare the two. Again, ignore the background. That's really distracting and annoying, but basically doesn't really make a difference. And you can see what the HRI map on the left and the JPEG on the right actually provide. So you can see that HRI maps are much better in actually providing the lighting for your scene. You can see how much detail you actually are getting from the HRI, and JPEGs themselves, they look very washed out and not that very good. And I'll show you another benefit of this down the track. So I'm just going to turn this one off. So this is our overcast, which means that there's no direct shadows anywhere in any one direction. Everything is just looking gloomy. The better way to be doing this is to select our overcast HRI and just replace it with something else. So in this case, I'm going to choose a daylight JPEG again, just so you can see the difference once again. Okay, anytime today. Oops, we stuffed up our beautiful view. It's not a problem. Just need to make it work. Okay, so here we go again. I'm just going to find a nice little view that we can use. Okay, maybe something like this. It's still a little bit too close. Okay, something like this. Okay, doesn't make a difference. Okay, here we are. So this is going to be our wonderful daylight JPEG. You can sort of see how this is looking. Again, this is using brute force and the uh, non and a progressive rendering engine method, which is not very. It's not as efficient as the bucket method that we showed you in class. So please use this to actually do the rendering, and I'm just using this so I can actually showcase you live all these differences. So I'm just going to save this, and now we'll go back to here and we'll just change and select our HDRI daylight. And you can see the difference already in this file. Um, Again, you have to play a little bit with these colors. Of course, you can sort of go and increase the overall multiplier so it actually is stronger or not as strong light. Um, but you can sort of see, if I save this one as well, the difference between the two is quite drastic. And I recommend you play around and you use this to your advantage. And the better one, if I can show you here as well, the beauty of this is, of course, you may think, well, this is not looking that good, and that's because every map has a sun. So these are all 360 panoramas basically, and they all have sun in one direction and nothing in the others, right? So basically, in the horizontal rotation here, we can just try to do a rotation and try to find where the sun is. So in this case, you can see if I did a 180 rotation, you can see that now the shadows are starting to appear on this side because the sun is in front of us, and the shadows are being cast that way. So if I go and change this to 90, and then we can change the multiplier here as well to be something like 2. And you can sort of see what it's trying to do. It changes your scene in such a good way, in such a quick way. I can't recommend anything else other than HDRIs to sort of make your lighting much simpler and easier. And you can get these for free in various websites. And the beautiful one is, I'm just going to select the sunset one, so you can see how quickly you can change the look of the scene without much work at all. So I'm just going to reduce the overall multiplier back to 1 because this one is a little bit too bright. Look at those beautiful shadows, literally based on wherever the actual sun location is, based on that the map itself. So there's no lights involved at all. It's just using the HRI map itself to map all of these beautiful shadows and just create this atmosphere that you would struggle to do in less than 1 hour, using the normal daylight scene setup. And it's not only the light itself, it's also the surrounding area of this scene. So all of these different tones are actually picked up and they are reflected into your geometry itself, and it just looks really nice. So basically that's it really. That's your HRI maps in a nutshell. um, when we are saving, of course, we just need to select, like I said, any of these transparent formats like a PNG or the TIFF. So TIFF is there. Where is the little PNG? There we go. Or the PNG here. That's all you really need. Both of these, PNG is a lossless format, which means it does not lose uh, um, the pixels as you're sort of saving, whereas the TIFF is again it's an older format, so that's why I prefer PNG. It's smaller in size and it has a few additional functions that you're not really going to be using. But I don't know, I just prefer this one because it's a bit newer format. All these, the gurus of the 3D world, they usually use TIFF because that was the only useful image back 10 or 15 years ago. But PNG has sort of climbed up the ranks in the last decade or so because it's just now just as good as the TIFF used to be and better. But for you and for what you're trying to do, it does, literally any one of these formats will be just enough, just fine. So don't stress which one you choose, whatever you prefer or whatever is the smaller size, that's one you should go with. Okay. And yeah, and one other thing that I would recommend when you're doing all of this is to create yourself a new material. So I'm just going to create a new one. Just let's say this one here, select it, and just select yourself a V-Ray material. You can leave it as gray, or maybe increase it slightly more towards the white, and just name this one as an override. side, and go into your rendering and setup, or F10, and from here you can navigate in your scene, and you can select yourself a under global switches, click on the override material, and then just click and drag the one you created into the override slot, and go instance again, like we said. Basically what this does, it will replace all your materials with a just this material. So this one here will be used for every single geometry you have in your scene. And the beauty of that is it will just make it easier to see and find the lighting to be exactly the way you want it. And then once you set up your lighting with this sort of grayish or whitish material, then you know. Hold on, let me just stop and restart this because it's a major change for the progressive material rendering. So once you do this and set up your scene to have the proper lights with just a gray scene, you will actually then be able to start putting in proper textures and materials for all of these objects, and your scene is going to look $1,000,000, honestly. You can sort of see that now everything is the same color, so you can easily see any sort of nuances of your lighting setup, and you can sort of start adding additional lights, in let's say in these light fixtures here, or you can start adding lights, through the windows and so on, whatever you want. But this is basically setting up your scene to be very beautiful. I'm gonna try and find a night HRI scene that if I have any, and I'll be back in a second. Hold on. Okay, I've managed to find a sort of nightish HRI map as well. So I'm just going to click on our HRI map there and change this one to be the night. And you can sort of see that it's starting to provide you that dusk, uh, just after dusk setting. And once you start adding your lights in here, it can start looking very nice indeed. So in here, if I go in just quickly and not very accurately, so don't be judging too harshly, and you can sort of start putting in these little lights, just like a little plain lights. They start going up. You can sort of see that you can create uh, additional lights, so you can start putting them wherever you want to add whatever out effect you want. So in this case, what I want to do here, just do something like this instance, maybe 7 times, and when I go there, you get something like this. And because they're instances, they should all be the same. So if I change the intensity with one of them, all of them will change at the same time. So yeah, you can sort of start adding bits and bobs just to make your scene more interesting, and depending on which HRI you select and pick, it really can make a world of difference. So yeah, this is how you can quickly create your own studio render of your project, and it's going to look fairly impressive, and then you can lie to your studio tutors that you spent weeks on doing this. All right, and people will believe you because it looks good. Okay, thank you guys, see you next time.